If you're in your first 3 to 6 months of leadership or management, this short training is for you. And if you implement everything that I'm going to walk you through, people are going to start to assume that you've been doing leadership for a while. And if you have been doing leadership for a while, then this video is also going to be good to see if you're missing anything. I've spent over 5 years in corporate leadership, and it took me way too long to learn these lessons because they would just assume knowledge, so this will set you up for success. I'll talk you through what to focus on in your first 3 months of leadership. To give you an overview of what I cover in this video, month 1 is all about communication practices, pathways, communication cascades. Month 2 is all about team culture and conflict. And month 3 is KPIs, and I don't just mean tracking KPIs, but making sure that you've got the right KPIs that empower performance as opposed to disempowering productivity. This will make a lot more sense when we get there. And yes, a lot of this may sound very bare minimum, basics, but the thing is, with so many of my leadership mentoring clients, almost every breakdown in communication or certain kind of dysfunction, and I don't mean toxic, but just dysfunction, there's like an inefficiency, there's just something's not working the way it should, is usually because there is a lacking or a complete absence of one of the things I just spoke about. And by focusing on these 3 areas, you're going to create a really great and solid foundation for you to lead from. Because when you have these foundations sorted, that's when you start getting high-performing teams emerge, where you start getting great cultures emerge. And what often happens is other leaders in the company will start looking at what you're doing and being like, hang on, why do you have such a great team culture? Why is your team so great? I mean, you're probably a great leader, but like, what's the secret? So you can send them this video. So the first month you're in leadership, you've done your handover, you've done any of that pre-training, and it's now you're the manager in this situation. You want to start by reviewing the communication cascades or the communication pathways. And what I mean by this is in particular your meetings. And so what can often happen with meetings and why everyone has so many meetings is that previous managers added a meeting and then someone's just carried it forward. And now no one actually knows why that meeting exists and no one has the courage to challenge it. And so now everyone has all these meetings which aren't even right or aren't even correct, and no one's really sure if they just can it or actually if people want to do them. And so for you and your team, definitely review the meetings and be cutthroat. Because the thing is, there's 3 types of meetings and people just do these so wrong. It's the reason why meetings are so draining and exhausting, because if you do this right, then they can actually be opportunities for collaboration and productivity and working through problems in a really fast way. And so the 3 types of meetings are one-to-ones. And then there's group meetings, which are announcements or workshops. And group meetings are literally anything that is not a one-to-one. And the thing is with these group meetings, so announcement and workshops, is I think a lot of people think that by combining them, they're going to get double the amount of effectiveness. But the problem is because they are so different, they actually cancel each other out. And I don't know if anyone actually even understands the difference. Sometimes you'll have a meeting and you're like, okay, that was actually really good. And it's probably because it was a workshop without anyone realizing. And so an announcement meeting is, as it sounds, it's the giving or like telling everyone a bunch of information, cascading down whatever, need to know or whatever, which is fine. Every now and then we need those, but we actually need a lot less of those than most people have on their calendars. And it also depends on the role you're in. If you're more of a frontline manager, then you need maybe like less than 10% of your meetings need to be announcement meetings. If you're higher up exec, then there's going to be a lot more because you're getting updates and reports from different areas of the business. And so actually have a look at your meetings and see how many are actually announcement meetings, or they're trying to be workshops, but they're actually announcements. And the way you can tell the difference is it actually doesn't matter if anyone responds. So in an announcement meeting, someone's talking, they may want people to respond, but it's actually not required for anyone to respond. This is an announcement meeting. You probably don't need to go to a lot of these. The ones you do need to go to for sure are any you're hosting, obviously, any that you are the direct recipient of. So maybe it literally might be your manager's announcement. But if you're sitting on the sidelines at any other announcement meetings, these are the first things you want to cut. And the reason you want to cut out all these excessive announcement meetings is so you have space for the workshops and the one-to-ones. One-to-ones are so important, and I thought one-to-ones, I would just assume like everyone did them. But I think a lot of people think that because they're working with their team, if you're constantly talking to people in your team throughout the day, it's like, well, what's the point in the one-to-one? The point of the one-to-one is to have a consistent communication rhythm, right? This is the practice. You have a rhythm to the communication, because sometimes if you don't have one-to-one, you might be talking to someone a lot when there's like a problem or stuff going on, but then you don't talk about them for a while, but then their stuff start percolating, things start building up, and then they call you and there's all these things. And when you have a one-to-one, what happens is you start kind of almost preempting the one-to-one. So both you as the manager and your team member, you'll start having things throughout your day that come up. And what I used to do is I would be like, oh yeah, that's a good like one-to-one point of discussion. Obviously, if there's anything super urgent, I'll just call my manager. But anything else, or if my team for that matter, as opposed to particularly because at the time I had a very site-based team, so I couldn't just call them all the time because they're out driving, they're just out of reception. And so having that one-to-one, that checklist, as I'm reading my emails, as I'm going through tasks, I just add items to discuss. And so what that means is that you can have people feel like they're in the loop a lot, and you're getting a lot of consistent updates without needing to have a full update. And the difference with this as well is like, you might be like, oh, yes, but I already have team meetings. The thing is, really, the real problems, the real things you need to fix, and the real things people are stuck on, they are not going to bring up during a team meeting. They are only going to bring that up in a one-to-one. And for so many people, these announcement meetings that I mentioned are their opportunity to just check out, to just like zone out. And so if you're telling them important information in an announcement team meeting, and it feels like they're not listening, it's probably because they're not, but also don't be offended by that. It's kind of just like background information. And if there is anything super critical you want someone to know, you need to then bring it up again in a one-to-one. This is huge. Like, for so long, I didn't bother talking about this on my channel because I didn't realize that it was so consistent that people just assume that if you talk about something once, they're just going to get it. You need to tell them directly, like, this important piece of information is for you. I want you to do this. And the thing is, with one-to-ones as a manager, you start building that rapport with your team members. You start getting to know them. So delegation just becomes so easy. It's not like, okay, now I need to delegate these tasks. It's just like, whether it's week to week, fortnightly, you can decide, honestly, minimum half an hour a fortnight. It doesn't even need to be that time consuming. And the more consistent you get with one-to-ones, the less time consuming it is anyway, because everything, as opposed to your team constantly calling you about things, it's like they have a set time that they know they can talk to you about a bunch of topics, and so do you with them. And so then the other one is workshops. And workshops, these are the collaborative ones. These are the tactical, the problem solving, the sprints. And these are actually such valuable meetings, if you will, or opportunities to work together. And the problem is when people try to make the announcement meetings a workshop meeting, and then people are just like, they don't know if they should be listening or interacting, and there's probably too many people in the meeting to start with, and so they don't really want to interact. And so when you cut down on the announcement meetings, you have way more space for workshop meetings, and you don't necessarily need workshop meetings to be a consistent frequency. I mean, you can if you want. Obviously, it depends on the work. If there's always something that you pull everyone together to work on together, right? It's collaborative. There's a back and forth. You actually can't progress with it unless you're having conversations. This is the key difference. And by creating space for those, if anything comes up, it's not like, oh my God, I need to now sit out of all these announcement meetings. It's like, yes, we've got the space, and you can really productively collaborate, and it actually creates a better culture, because when people work with each other, they build that rapport also with each other, but it also feels like they're contributing. That's like the thrill we get out of work, is being able to actually progress and achieve and move things along, particularly if it's like a shared achievement, right? And so really having a look at the meetings that you've inherited and really be cutthroat about what you actually need. Make sure there are one-to-ones. Make sure there's space for workshops. And if you're on the sideline for these announcement meetings, you probably don't need to go to them. If you get into a habit of cascading down, so for example, if your manager goes to all these meetings, having a one-to-one with them and letting them cascade down the 10% of critical information that you need to know, and that you doing the same for your team is cascading down the 10% that each person needs to know. My manager did this so well. Sometimes I was in the announcement meeting, sometimes I wasn't. And even if I was, he always was like, I just want to reinforce this for you. This is important for you. This is an important piece of information you and your team need to know. And that worked so well. I never felt like I was going to too many meetings, and everyone felt like they had enough information all the time. So that's month one. Focus on that month one, sort that out month one, update, refine, make sure it works for you and your team. Just if you upset someone by not going to a meeting, then, that's a whole nother emotional maturity conversation right there. And then by the second month, you're going to start to notice people's nuances. And so that's why the second month, you really want to focus on culture and conflict. When I say conflict, I don't mean direct actual conflict, but conflicting ways of working, conflicting ways of thinking about things or communicating. You're going to start to notice these nuances within your team and how some people can work really well together and some people can't. And it doesn't mean that any one person is bad or wrong or just not good. It just means that the people they work with or how they work or what they're working on might not be so good. And so as the leader, as someone coordinating the team and hopefully giving them opportunities and in creating an environment where they can thrive, where they can achieve their potential, where they can do their best work, you can start to notice this and adjust accordingly. Because the thing is with culture, it's going to happen anyway, and so you might as well be intentional about it. And culture is essentially what you allow. It's the standard you allow. It's the behavior. It's the gossiping or not gossiping. It's the quality of work that you allow. It's the level of interaction and friendship you allow. It's the standard that you lead by example with. It's how you lead by example and the behaviors that you accept as the leader. In episode 2 of the Resonance Club, I talk about how as the leader, you are the epicenter of the team culture. It doesn't mean you're the only one that influences it, but you are the center, you are the thing that it rests and is held upon. And so depending on your behavior, how you communicate, what you expect, particularly as the new manager, as the new leader, right, there's going to have been an existing culture. And I don't recommend necessarily trying to continue the previous culture or trying to pick up where the last manager left off. First of all, it's going to shift regardless because you are a different person. You just have a different leadership style no matter how much you try to be like the last manager. Hopefully, you're not trying to be like the last manager because you are an amazing person as you are, and leading from your natural leadership style is just going to be better for everyone. And so the culture is essentially already shifting by you coming into that leadership role. And so starting to notice the nuances, starting to notice what you're allowing, starting to notice what you actually don't want to allow, what you need to dial back on, things you want to be intentional about, things you want to encourage more. Maybe you want to encourage more open communication. Maybe you want to encourage better feedback cycles. And culture is also, it's bringing in that month one, right? Like If people aren't used to having one-to-ones, now you're starting to create a culture of clear communication cascades. Literally anything and everything. But just start to notice what's already going on and then, direct it intentionally. Lead. Lead the culture as opposed to being a passive observer and recipient of it. And sometimes that just means noticing what has been working, what used to work, what you've found works. Really, it is such a dynamic thing, team culture, because anytime anyone leaves or change, it's going to shift again slightly. The biggest shift is as you as the leader when that gets swapped out, but you will notice micro shifts in the culture as people change anyway. And you may think, well, yes, the company has a culture. Yes, the company absolutely has a culture, but there's like the company culture and then there's team cultures, and essentially either the company culture fosters like specific team cultures or it doesn't. And so yes, that is going to be a big influence, but you can still have a really great team culture in a company with a really bad culture. You just got to be real. You just kind of got to fight for it more than if you're in a company where a good culture is a natural thing. You don't really need to fight for it. It's just a natural thing. In a company with a bad culture, you really got to fight for that good culture, and it is worth it. In terms of how to deal with conflict, I mean, there's the extreme example of bullying and fighting and stuff. That's a whole different topic. Often where the bullying and fighting actually starts, though, is micro interactions of conflict, like I said, conflicting communication styles, conflicting ways of working. Some people like to do things really fast. Some people like to go slow and think about it. And if you have those two people working together and they see the other person's differences as a problem, this can create problems, right? For example, I can be quite big picture and ambiguous. And so if I didn't have this insight or awareness I do around, or if I didn't even have the confidence within myself to know that I'm not great at everything and I actually love working with people that are completely different to me, then I would lose so many opportunities, and I would honestly... I'll get so bogged down in details when I'm not actually that much of a detail person, because I can see what my strengths are. Then when I work with someone that's completely different to me, I actually love it. It's amazing. And I can see how when they start getting caught in the detail, I'm not mean about it. I'm just like, okay, yep, they're in the detail. Can I let them be in the detail, or do I just gently bring them up into the big picture? That's a very general example, but just because someone thinks and does something completely different to you it shouldn't mean anything about who they are. It literally is an opportunity for you to figure out how to work with someone that's different than you, to learn from someone that's different to you, which it brings me to curiosity. The best way to address and understand any conflict. So this is the thing that so many managers get wrong, is they're not willing to understand where the conflict came from initially. And that's why you always address any type of conflicting dynamics with curiosity, because all the things that make a workplace toxic, like shame and judgment and blame, is literally a lack of curiosity. And so whatever conflicts are pre-existing, right, or are starting to come up, even with you, with team members, with anything, meet it with curiosity. Start with curiosity, with questions, with deep dive, actually wanting to understand. It's not trying to understand who to blame and who's at fault, but actually switch your mind into like, I wonder what's actually going on here. How can I think about this in a different way? And that's going to foster a really collaborative and trust building type culture, as opposed to a, everyone butting heads and competing and, whatever. We don't want, hopefully you're watching this video because you don't want that type of culture. And to help with this, to naturally segue into month 3, which is where you can focus on KPIs. The reason I didn't talk about this first up is because honestly, KPIs are pointless if you don't have your communication worked out, if you don't have a good culture, and if you don't have some sort of conflict resolution mindset process in place, because just putting KPIs straight up front, okay, everyone needs to perform, this is what we need to do, then, unless that was working initially, it's not going to just suddenly start working because you're their leader. And with KPIs, what can often happen, particularly if you're working at a much bigger business, if it's, a smaller business, then you can just do a sense check on this, on the KPIs that you're working towards. But definitely in much larger corporations, right, you have the real high level, ambiguous, lagging indicator type KPIs. And for those that don't know, you have lagging and leading indicators. It's literally, a lagging indicator is the outcome of action, so it's the end result. Leading indicators are the actions you can take. And so only having lagging indicators isn't that empowering, because if you don't actually know what the leading indicator is, if you don't actually know what the action is that creates the outcome, then you can't do more of the action to create the outcome. And so you're kind of just at the whim to see if that outcome is going to work out or not. And so often at a high level, there's these very ambiguous lagging indicators. For example, better workplace satisfaction, or 10% less loss and 50% more profit, or 0 incidents and 10 times production, or whatever, right? These are all outcomes of actions that have come beforehand. And for a big company, it's actually okay for them to have, it's not ideal, but the thing is, you kind of don't want them to have specific KPIs at a really high level, because what you want to do at a team level, that's where you get specific, and clear on the leading indicators. So how does your team contribute to that big ambiguous outcome? And when you start to think about this and ask people about this, if you discover that no one can answer the question, what are the actions you do that contribute to that big outcome, then you will realize why so many people are inefficient and why performance is so unpredictable. Because the reality is, if even you can't answer what the leading indicators are, then the truth is no one actually knows what they're doing, right? And so it's your opportunity to decide, okay, what are the specific leading indicators? What are the key actions that we do as a team that contribute to that higher objective? And I'm using very corporate terms, but essentially what this does is it helps people understand how they are contributing to the bigger purpose, right? Amazing. Which is a key motivation and a key motivating factor for people to want to do better, to want to keep showing up, to want to contribute, when they actually understand how their contribution is relating to that big ambiguous objective. Have a look at the current KPIs that you're expected to meet, and start to even notice, like, okay, which one of these are actually lagging indicators and which one of these are leading indicators, and start to figure out which of the lagging indicators that your team contribute. And then you kind of work backwards, like, okay, well, what actual action steps contribute to this lagging indicator? And what of those action steps does our team work on? And then, if you're in a smaller company, then, the leading and lagging indicators are going to be a lot closer. If you're working directly with the CEO, right, then actions and outcomes are, shoulder to shoulder. So you want to just do a sense check to make sure that you know exactly what actions you're taking that contribute to that KPI, that is the lagging indicator. Because when you know what KPI that you can control, because the leading indicators you can control with your actions, that's the other part, is like it is within your sphere of control, as opposed to just something that happens out of your control. And when something happens out of your control, but you're expected to contribute to it, it's a bit disempowering because you don't really know how to. Whereas when something is within your control and you're expected to adhere to it or to do it, it's a lot more empowering because you actually know what you need to do. And then if the whole KPI thing is like, yep, actually it's super clear, we know exactly what we need to do, they're great, amazing. Just remember to not use KPIs to judge the character of someone, to judge someone. They are a judge of the health and efficiency of the system. And when I say system, I don't mean software. Software is a tool. A system is the people plus the tools and how they all function, operate, and work together in a smooth way. Because if the system is healthy and efficient and the KPIs are clear, are specific, you got leading and lagging, then the flow on from system to meeting KPIs, it's going to be very seamless. But the problem is we don't meet the KPIs. Someone decides it's that person's fault. It's this thing's fault. And it's like, it's not necessarily. It's more of a measurement of the health of that system. And if the system isn't working, is it actually that person? Or is it the process? I could go into a lot more detail around health and efficiency of systems when you're talking about people and tools, but I'll leave it at that for this episode. And so in summary, month 1 in your new leadership role, audit gap analysis of the communication cascades. Make sure they work for you and your team, and make sure there are definitely one-to-ones. Doesn't mean you have to do an hour weekly, but at least half an hour fortnightly. Month 2, you'll start to naturally notice the culture and conflicts appear. You'll start to get a feel for how things are, and so start leading or directing them intentionally to create a culture that you actually want to be a part of. And then month 3 is where you can really start to refine and dial in the KPIs as a measurement of the system that your team is contributing to. And now if you're interested in how to respond under pressure so you don't accidentally behave like a bad manager, check out this next video. And remember, lead yourself first to lead others better.